Galen Gingrich, most recently senior minister of All Souls Unitarian Church up the street, and now affiliated with the Van Leer Jerusalem Institute. A question for Prashan. The late Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, chief rabbi of Great Britain, wrote a book about 25 years ago titled The Dignity of Difference, in which he observed that economic superpowers tend to have relatively short lifespans, a few hundred years, whereas the great religions endure for thousands of years. And he says that what makes a culture invulnerable is the compassion it shows for the vulnerable. But a corollary of his comparison is that the kind of change you're talking about takes a very long time, generations. So my question is, how do you build into your process the patience and the understanding that these bridges are easy to build and hard to build and easy to destroy, and that deep systemic change is going to take generations, so 50 years, not a month or a quarter or even a year?
It's very important to have no delusion in the fact that if these challenges have taken place over decades, there is no fix-all solution that overnight or even one election cycle is going to solve the problems. And if you put all your hope in that, you're bound to be more disappointed that you might lose your capacity to engage further. But I also believe, I recently just published a book called The Phoenix Generation, The Role of Youth in Transforming Conflict. And what I wanted to do was look at 200 grassroots movements throughout the world in the last 200 years and looked at, have they had an impact to transform society? And then I've identified the big five grassroots movements that changed the world. So you have President Mandela's movement of the ANC. You have Gandhi's movement for independence. You have Wilberforce and the movement to abolish slavery in the United Kingdom and elsewhere. You have the suffragette movement for the rights of women to franchise. And then you also have Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King and the civil rights movement here. And I started trying to look at what are some ingredients that all of them had in common and how were they able to make change. And the reality is they didn't take 70 years for change. It's about 25-year process where they really saw. And from that, well, Mandela took a little bit more at the ANC, but he was in prison for 20-something years or 40-something years. So, but when we ask the question, how is that possible? How is that timeline expedited? It's once there was definitely the ownership of people embracing the cause and they're marching towards that. They have a clear end game of what are we working towards. It's not trying to manage the elements of the conflict right now, it's where are we heading to, what's the vision, and for that to happen, what are the small battles we need to win now that will help the morale and keep the troops, the peace-building troops, energized to keep going and celebrate those victories. And when you do that, I feel the momentum is built, and you have to have strategic ways of, here are the small battles, here's the end game, and then how are we building our competencies and our capacities as time goes by to be more effective at the next battle and the next battle. And looking for those political opportunities in time in all of our countries at a moment in time, it's a prime opportunity to attack for change. But more often than not, civil society is not organized to pounce on that time. And then they're playing catch up. We're always reacting to the problem. Like was mentioned, it's pointless once the violence has started to try and do peace building work. You have to see it coming and start engaging. The reason that we want to engage in the US is that people who've been through civil wars and seen the brutality of civil wars, we're looking at your country and we're saying the red flags are all over the place. But most of your countrymen don't seem to see it's a problem. And so we're trying to engage now because now it's what matters, the next 5 years or immediately. And so that's understanding the ebbs and flows in conflict. Dr. John Paul Lederach is my mentor at Notre Dame, and he wrote the foreword for my book. And he always says, look at the ebbs and flows of conflict. See how this has happened. History has repeated itself. But how would you engage now proactively? Don't wait till it happens. Don't wait till donors know that it's happening. Because donors know it's happening 5 years after it happened. So if you wait for the funding to be available, you're wasting time. So how are you reading the ground? And how are you mobilizing? And do you have a mobilizing strength to engage right now? Those are the ways that we see it.